1, 2. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us here today and this morning. I thank the senior most feminist in the United Nations, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. And I thank you all, our civil society partners, for joining us in this very important discussion and dialogue on the margins of CSW67, the Secretary General's Town Hall with civil society. So welcome to you all. A lot of energy in the room this morning. Great to be together in person today again. This year's CSW priority theme focuses on innovation, technology, change, and education in the digital age for the empowerment of all women and girls. Just as technology brings people closer and is crucial to advancing gender equality, it also has the potential to widen the inequalities gap. We hope that this year's CSW will result in strong agreed conclusions that seek to recognize women's leadership and that address the significant gender gaps in technology and innovation, and that asserts that digital rights are women's rights. That we hope also that we recognize that tech-facilitated gender-based violence and its impacts on women and girls is crucial and is dangerous, and that we identify solutions that work through multi-sectoral partnerships. Everyone, civil society, private sector, governments must do their part. And we hope that our discussion will feed directly into next year's Summit of the Future, Secretary General, and its Global Digital Compact, which will address the need for an open, free, and secure digital commons that safeguards human rights online and applies an intersectional lens to technology and innovation. Dear friends, fellow feminists, let me thank you again and thank the Secretary General for continuing to prioritize this annual meeting with civil society. And before I invite the Secretary General to provide his opening remarks, I have a few housekeeping notes. Once the SG has delivered his remarks, we will open the floor for questions and answers. And I would request those of you who wish to ask a question to raise their hands. I will then select a set of 3 speakers.
May I interrupt? Not only questions, but comments,
comments, okay.
Suggestions, ideas. No, I mean.
Totally agree. Bravo. Thank you, Secretary General. See, he is our most senior feminist around here. He is. I will then select, as I said, a set of 3 speakers at a time. I know you have a lot to share, but I kindly ask that you keep your comments, your interventions, your questions short so that we can ensure that the Secretary General is able to hear from as many of you as possible. So now let us all give a warm welcome to the Secretary General. Mr. Secretary General, you have the floor.
Dear friends, it's very good to be together again. And we are meeting at a difficult and a pivotal moment for gender equality around the world. We had years and years of incremental progress. Women's and girls' rights have stalled now and are going into reverse. And the trend is clear. In Afghanistan, women and girls have been erased from public life and are virtually imprisoned in their homes. From Myanmar to Sudan, autocratic regimes and violent extremist groups persecute and harass women for speaking out and going about their daily lives. Parties to conflict perpetrate horrific crimes of gender-based violence. And police, even in some of the richest countries in the world, attack and abuse the women they are supposed to protect. The COVID-19 pandemic is far from over for women who lost their jobs and girls who lost their chance of education. And the cost of living crisis is hitting women and girls first and worst. halfway to the SDG deadline of 2030, the truth is that half of humanity is largely being left behind. In every region, women are worse off than men, earning less and doing up to 10 times more unpaid care work. The food crisis has a disproportionate impact on women and girls, who are often last to eat and first to go hungry. And women's and girls' sexual and reproductive rights are under siege as many governments undermine their autonomy over their bodies and their lives. Many of the challenges we face today, from conflicts to climate chaos and the cost of living crisis, are the result of what it is a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture taking the key decisions that guide our world. And while men still largely make those decisions, women and girls often pay the price. 90% of refugees from the war in Ukraine are women and their children. And women and children are 14 times more likely to die in disasters than men. As women's civil society organizations, you are on the front lines of this crisis every day, and you know these facts better than anyone. And without your support and your engagement, the situation would be even worse, and I want to thank you for your very important work. So, dear friends, against this backdrop, women and girls now face a new source of discrimination and bias: digital technology. Today's digital technology often uses algorithms designed by a male-dominated tech industry based on male-dominated data. Rather than presenting facts and addressing bias, technology based on incomplete data and badly designed algorithms is digitizing and amplifying sexism with deadly consequences. Medical decisions based on data essentially from men can damage women's health. Safety features based on men's bodies can put women's lives at risk, namely in the car industry. And policies based on men's data will leave women and girls even farther behind. Artificial intelligence will be shaping the world of the future. Now, without women's equal input, it will continue to be a men's world. And the gender digital divide is fast becoming the new face of gender inequality. Rather than uplifting women and girls by providing access to education, healthcare, financial services, technology is often used to harm and control them through surveillance and trafficking. Online spaces are not safe for women and girls. Gender-based violence online has increased exponentially. Organized campaigns target women politicians, journalists, and activists, a direct attack on women's representation and on democracy itself. So-called influencers denigrate women and feed misogyny and toxic forms of masculinity to millions of young men and boys. And groups that campaign against women's rights find a warm welcome on digital platforms. Centuries of patriarchy and damaging stereotypes prevent women innovators from getting the recognition they deserve. The skills of Black American women, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Dorothy Vaughan, were integral to the success of the Apollo space program. Thanks to the movie Hidden Figures, their stories and names are now well known. But while 12 men have walked on the moon, not a single woman has done so. And those same stereotypes push girls away from studying science, engineering, and math, and strangle the careers of women scientists. Women are credited less for their achievements, win far fewer prizes, and receive less research funding than men, even when they have the same conditions. Just 2% of venture capital investment goes to startups founded by women. And this must change. Dear friends, the male chauvinist domination of new technologies is undoing decades of progress on women's rights. Gender equality is a question of power. For more than 100 years, that power was gradually becoming more inclusive. But technology is now reversing that trend, and it is concentrating power again more in the hands of men to the detriment of all. So in the face of this patriarchal pushback, we must push forward, not just for women and girls, but for all communities and societies. Without the insights and creativity of half of the world, scientific progress will fulfill just half its potential. And the safe, humane online environment requires the contributions of all of humanity. But let me be clear, this will not happen on its own. We must take decisive and deliberate action. Policymakers must create, and in some circumstances must be forced to create, transformative change by promoting women and girls' equal rights and opportunities to learn, by dismantling barriers and smashing glass ceilings. And I call on all leaders as a matter of urgency to take up the recommendations in the UN's first ever report on technology, innovation, education, and gender equality. And they include promoting education and training in digital skills for women and girls, algorithms that align with human rights and gender equality, and investments in bridging the digital gender divide. We must connect everyone, everywhere to the internet by 2030. And leaving no one behind means leaving no one offline. But an internet connection is just a first step. The equal representation and participation of women is at the heart of transforming political, social, and economic models that today still largely exclude them. We need to overhaul the patriarchal structures that perpetuate gender inequality, and especially in the technology sector. Dear friends, the recent visit to Afghanistan by the Deputy Secretary General and by the Executive Director of UN Women shows our deep commitment to women's rights in the most challenging situations. And it highlighted the necessity of supporting women when they need us most, in crisis. To this end, I've committed to do everything in my power to raise $300 million over the next 3 years for women's organizations and human rights defenders in crisis situations. It will not be easy, but we'll do everything to make sure that we are able to fundraise properly in this regard. And from now on, in United Nations-led or co-led peace processes, we will strive to increase women's participation, and our aim, we are very far from it, our aim is a target of 30% at least. Now, around the world, UN country teams support efforts to prohibit gender discrimination, to set quotas for women's representation, and to establish equal rights and equal pay. We are advocating everywhere for women and girls' rights to education and opportunities, and for protection their sexual and reproductive rights, and advance their equal but the digital gender divide. And we are also promoting a code of conduct for information integrity on digital platforms that will aim to reduce harm and increase accountability online while defending the right of freedom to freedom of expression. So our common agenda is largely a feminist agenda, and it aims to make multilateral frameworks more representative and inclusive, frameworks developed by women, with women, for women. Member States will address many of these issues at the SDG Summit in September, and the Summit of the Future next year. But your voices are essential to these processes. And so, dear friends, The United Nations is trying to lead by example. Our system-wide strategy on gender parity has achieved and maintained parity in resident coordinators around the world and among the almost 200 senior leaders of the UN. And if current progress is maintained, we are on track to achieve 28. But we are not on track to reach parity at every level and in every location. And there are specific challenges in peacekeeping and political missions in the field, and we must focus on these in the coming years. Following the report on our common agenda, I also commissioned an independent review of capacities across the United Nations to deliver on gender equality. We need to look exactly what we are doing, with what capacity, and what are the results of what we are doing, and have an independent report on that for us to be able to take decisions. And so the report addresses the structures, the funding, the leadership of our efforts to deliver for women and girls around the world. And these will form part of the discussions on reforms to the system as we move towards what we call a UN 2.0, an organization that is fit for purpose to deliver for all. So, dear friends, the work of the United Nations would not be possible without our strong partnership with women's civil society, without you. So I thank you for your contributions, and I look forward to our continued close collaboration. Together, we must resist the pushback against women's rights. We must push forward for women, girls, and our world. And as I said, I'm here essentially to listen, and I look forward to hearing your views. If you have any question, I'll try to answer, but my main objective is to listen, for me to be able also to change the many things in which I'm not yet doing what I should be doing in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your leadership on gender equality and women's rights. And thank you also for your inspiring words this morning. We will now open the floor, and we would like to invite the following speakers to address the SG. And as I said, I will take in threes. So the first three is Huri Godelikian, Chair of the NGO CSW New York, to be followed by Prabeline Tuteja, a youth leader from the YP Foundation, and then our adolescent leader, Rania Harara. So, Huri, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Seema, and Your Excellency, Antonio. I'm so happy we're finally in the same room. We've been on Zoom for the last few years. I want to really reiterate and thank you for your opening remarks. They are strong and very much welcomed by civil society. And thank you for keeping your promise to try to make gender-based violence a standing agenda for future CSW sessions. We know it is not easy to convince member states, but we also know this issue is at the core of gender inequality. We must ensure that these 2 weeks result in recommendations that are action-oriented and implementable. This year's theme is much-needed conversation. We cannot accept the fact that Silicon Valley has become Death Valley for women and girls. The UN system must give continued attention to digital tech and innovation. Women and girls constitute at least 50% of revenue for the tech industry, so our well-being and safety must take priority as the industry grows. Here are some of our recommendations. We know that GBV happens both online and offline, and we must find ways to hold perpetrators accountable. Cybercrime should be punishable in the same way as any other crime. Member states and the private sector have the power to reverse the regression in gender equality and uplift women and girls in all their diversity. Funding for training and lifelong learning to ensure sustainable employment. Mandate women in decision-making rooms, and tangible accountability. We urge you to keep the pressure on, and we trust that your resolve will bring our mutual goals to fruition. We at NGO CSW New York, as conveners of the largest global feminist gathering, promise to support you in every way we can. These recommendations are the result of months of global consultations, survey, and expert group inputs into our advocacy and research group. So thank you for taking it into consideration. And may I add a personal note? This is just as Huri Gedelekian. I think if we don't address conflict, militarism, state-sponsored violence, all of these actions are going to be repeated. We will do our best to fix them. But I have a suggestion, which even my team doesn't know I'm going to say, but I have the mic. It's my last year as chair of NGO CSW. I suggest member states really start addressing military spending. If they are concerned about not having enough funding for SDGs, why not reduce across the board, 193 countries, 5%, and bring that cut into SDG spending. And I want to finally say I want to support Costa Rica's statement. It's online. Look up on the Twitter. What she said with the Security Council and the General Assembly is so spot on. So I thank you for your patience with us, and thank you so much for listening.
Prableen, please go ahead.
Secretary General, for your remarkable note. As a young feminist from Global South, just hearing the fact that there's a commitment to the gender-based violence prevention, and also really looking at what does it mean for technology-facilitated violence to be taken down in these spaces is really, really remarkable. I'm Prableen. I'm the executive director of the YP Foundation, and I'm also the advisor of a young feminist policy collective called Feminist Munch. As a young person and as youth leaders in this space, and many, many youth leaders who are not here because of structural barriers, our question to you really is, what would be the actions that we can expect from your office to ensure a feminist, intersectional, and intergenerational leadership all the way to the highest level of the United Nations offices? Because your commitment and your strongest commitment to leadership has been to be representative of constituencies that are marginalized, and that the principle of nothing about us without us in policy-making spaces needs to be actualized. How and by when will youth leadership of adolescent girls beyond just the gender binary, and also looking at young women in these spaces, what will it take for the United Nations to look into their look into them as decision makers and policy developers in these spaces in the United Nations system? Thank you.
Thank you, Prableen. And now we move to Rania.
Hello everyone. Hello. My name is Rania Harara and I'm from Morocco. I would like to start by pointing out that all adolescent leaders in all our diversity are pretty disappointed to see that the town hall is happening at the same time as the interactive dialogue. This again tells us how much the UN values you at meaningful engagement. Again, the most affected population are not being able to be part of the conversation due to accessibility and mobility issues that the UN is not fighting enough. It's not the first time that the UN is failing us. 3 days ago, the Youth Forum happened, and not all youth that are affected by all of these issues were not able to be part of the conversation. We were also treated as sub-citizens because we were held outside of the headquarters. We were treated as our engagement was not meaningful. Less than 2 hours ago, I was not sure that I would be able to be part of the conversation. That will determine my present and my future, and the present and the future of thousands of other adolescent girls all around the world. Digital violence is not only affecting me, but affecting other girls around the world, and we have to be part of the conversation. This is not only about me. This is about the story of every adolescent girl who has been prevented from attending this event due to an access to funding, visa issues, and safety. This is about every adolescent girl that are not able to amplify their needs and support their empowerment because of the lack of digital access. UN members get to sit and speak on behalf of adolescent girls from Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, and Palestine because they failed to create a safe space and safe digital space for them. Equality and meaningful youth engagement is about digital access, digital literacy, and digital safety for all adolescent girls in all of their diversity. Adolescent girls are tired of being tokenized, and we are required to be part of the policy making. That is why I'm asking you, what are you doing right now and will be doing in the future to ensure an accessible and safe space for girls like me and a meaningful engagement UN policy of most affected population? Thank you.
Secretary General, over to you.
Well, sorry, what you are telling me is a total surprise, so I'd like to know exactly what happened. Because, I mean, the idea was that the CSW would be open to all people that were registered for CSW. So was there people that was kept outside after being registered?
A lot of people are not even able to attend New York because New York is not inaccessible and for everyone from the global south. There are people whose voices is valuable and should be included in the conversation and are not being able to be here due to visa issues. And I don't understand why we get to sit here. Visa issues, but also me, I did not have my badge until 30 minutes ago.
That's a different story because indeed, we are having difficult problems because we are not issuing the visas. The visas are issued by the host country. And we are having difficult country. I must confess I was completely surprised because, our instructions were to let all participants inside and no one excluded in any way. But if there are visa issues, I would like to ask you and the colleagues that what are the specific situations related to countries of origin in which these issues existed for us to be able to raise it seriously with the host country. Indeed, we know that there are these kind of problems. It doesn't depend on us, but we'll do everything to work with the host country to avoid these situations to be repeated. So thank you very much for the information, because for me, as I said, when you were saying what you were saying, I was totally surprised.
Thank you.
Now, in relation to the, I'm moving from backwards, but in relation to the second question, we have a strategy for gender parity, but I have to tell you that we have not yet an effective strategy for the rejuvenation of the UN. And this is something we are discussing now, and that is the reason why we are creating a youth office. We already got, because we had a youth envoy, but not a structure here to look systematically into the participation of young people in the UN structures, and at the same time to be the strong voice of the UN in relation to issues globally. It is true. We have been concentrated on gender parity, which means women and men, but disregarding the age. And obviously, as, this is done through recruitment and whatever, people with more experience has been benefiting more. So we have not yet, let's be clear, we have not yet adopted a rejuvenation strategy. But that was the idea for the next stage. So what you said was very useful, because now I have an instrument to say to my colleagues, now dear friends, it's not enough gender parity, we need also to have and it's not only for young women, it's also for young men. We need to have a younger UN, because, problems are changing so quickly that the truth is that young generations are better prepared than myself to look into, for instance, the impacts of digital technologies in the way governance takes place globally. So you are absolutely right, and we will try to do our best. In relation to the first intervention, I can only agree with everything that was said, and thank you so very much for your comments that were extremely useful. There is a serious question that you raised. It's a question of accountability. And one of the problems that exist is social platforms. I mean, if there is an attack against you in a newspaper or in a TV channel, and you are, with calumnies and things, well, we know all these things happen, you can bring that newspaper or that TV station to court. But with platforms, they will say, this is not our content, this is the content of the people that comes from, and so we are not accountable. I think this is something that member states need to seriously reconsider. Probably not in all circumstances, but at least in the circumstances where the algorithm is such that these things are more strongly multiplied because they are a better source of profit than other things that are more, I would say, mild. So I think that we need to seriously study with member states how these problems of accountability can be addressed, because at the present moment, in practical terms, there is no accountability about all the dramatic violations of women's rights through harassment and other forms of persecution that go through social media.
Thank you, Secretary General, for your insights and for your responses. I will now take the next round of 3 questions. The lady in the, yes, you? Yes, please. I will say 3 now, and then please, when you take the floor, you can identify yourself. Okay. I'm going to go that side. The lady in the peach over there, and the lady with the mask. You, yes. So please, I will come back. Yes, you. We have some, if you don't have, you have a microphone. Go ahead, please. And please identify yourself.
Good morning. Women of the world, I'm so proud of you that you're here. Secretary General, Queen Mother. Queen Mother's over here, Secretary General. Oh. Nice to see you again. Yes, thank you. It's always nice seeing you. Mr. Secretary General, I'm so moved that you are here this morning to be with us while the world is on fire. So I say to the women, we are proud that he's addressing us. As Queen Mother, been in this institution, as you all know, for 54 years as a humanitarian. And as Queen Mother during the pandemic, has traveled the world as an elder, intergenerational. I'm over 81 now, and I am the Queen Mother of hip-hop women, young women, the Queen Mother of hip-hop. I want to say to you, the Secretary General was very clear on some of the concerns that you have brought to us in civil society need to be resolved. As the United States, the host country for the UN, we have gone to Washington, D.C. and lobbied about inclusion of women coming to the United Nations. We did it for 2 years in a row. We will address it again to the U.S. mission to the United Nations. After receiving the Lifetime Award from our President, Joe Biden, and shaking hands with the first woman, Vice President Kamala Harris, I will get it to their desk of making it an access for you all to get to the headquarters of the United Nations and put on the table your concerns. So the Queen Mother is concerned about that. Hearing from grassroots women of civil society, women are saying, especially the younger women and intergenerational women, we're running out of time of engaging. Implementation, plan of action, best practices is very important to us. And so I say to you, whatever we can do to continue to support your leadership, Secretary General, Queen Mother is here, and I'm asking for 3 minutes of your courtesy time while you are in the house with us. So thank you for addressing all women of the world that is here and is not here. It is inclusion of all of us. And Queen Mother, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Is it okay? All right.
Yes, you.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead. Do you have the microphone?
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Grace Ananda. I work for Habitat for Humanity. A couple of years ago, you called on the world to develop a new social contract as an urgent need to address inequality that was exposed during the pandemic. Habitat for Humanity aligns with the call and was grateful to see housing included as a means of achieving equity. Would like to know the status of your work on the creation of a new social contract. That's where is it at the moment? Because we felt during the pandemic, everyone felt a house is a safe place. So we want to know where you are following the commitment you made a few years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Allison Brown. I'm the president of the International Alliance of Women, Equal Rights, Equal Responsibilities, founded in 1904 and in general consultation status with ECOSOC since 1947. We know that in order to bridge the digital divide, it is necessary to have reliable internet connections throughout the world, a true World Wide Web. We have also experienced in recent decades that when people are demonstrating for their human rights on the streets, autocratic governments come and shut the internet down to stop the flow of information to the protesters, but at the same time also stopping the flow of information for regular business and the information that women need to carry on their businesses and daily lives. We have been blue-skying an idea that there should be a neutral, world-spanning web of internet connectivity, possibly under the aegis of the United Nations, that would not be Earth-based and vulnerable to marauding armies and terror groups who could attack them and take them out, but rather space-based, where no matter what is happening on the ground, the flow of information that enables women to live their digital lives in peace and prosperity would continue to flow. Thank you.
Thank you. SG, back to you.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to our grandma for her always very strong intervention. And it's always a pleasure to have you in our meetings. And we will do our best to follow on your recommendations with the host country. Now, the idea of the social contract. We are seeing societies becoming more and more polarized. We are seeing democracy being put into question. We are seeing trust, lack of trust between people and the institutions becoming more and more frequent in our societies. And so we believe it is time for a serious dialogue within each country between the institutions of the country and the people in different ways. And of course, it is easier in a democracy than in a non-democratic state. And to have a consensus on what are the priorities in relation to the use of resources in education, in health, in social protection, in housing, in all these aspects. Now, this is something that I remember when I was in government in my own country. We had this kind of social agreement with the different partners, and this is something that I believe is important to strengthen social cohesion, to strengthen trust. But there is a problem. many countries have not the resources to be able to provide housing for everybody, to be able to have education systems working properly, to be able to have mechanisms of social protection available to everybody. And so linked to this idea of social contract, we have put the idea of a new global deal, which means a number of important reforms in the international economic and financial system in order to make sure that there is a global transfer of power and resources from the global north to the global south. The present situation is a situation of enormous inequality. We have seen vaccines. Vaccines were not properly distributed. Then the resources for the recovery from COVID. In the European Union, to which my country belongs, there was a possibility to print 750 billion euros and distribute it among member states. Here in the US, $1 trillion were printed. Developing countries cannot print money. If they print money, of course, printing is an image. It's through the central bank buying bonds of the state, and to create money available for the society. But developing countries cannot print money because their currencies would go down the drain. So they had not the same capacity to find the resources necessary to recovery from COVID. Then prices of food, of energy, interest rates are going up. Developing countries are paying a huge price. They have not the resources to cope with it. Debt. Debt is increasing in the developing world. No effective debt relief system until now was put in place. And middle-income countries, many of the developing countries are middle income, namely all the small island developing states that lived on tourism that during 2 years practically did not exist. As they are middle-income countries, they would not receive any concessional funding. So countries have not the capacity, many countries have not the capacity to have a social contract that takes really into account the rights of the people and provides to the people what they need. And that is why we need to accompany a social contract at country level with a new redistribution of power and resources at global level, because if not, the social contract can be meaningful in developed countries, but it will not be possible to implement in the developing world, and that is absolutely unacceptable. So we are very much committed to this. Of course, it's not easy to make these reforms of the international financial system, because there are many vested interests. Many, of course, do not want anything to change, or sometimes they want to change a little bit for everything to remain the same. But this is one of the key battles of our common agenda and of the SDG summit, the reform of the international financial system. Now, I think that one of our objectives that has been stressed in the Agenda 2030 is to have one global free internet for everybody. That is clear. And that internet should be free from any interference. That is clear as an objective. But it's not enough to have connectivity. We need to have literacy. Because if you have connectivity, but many people, and especially women, do not know how to use the connectivity in itself is not sufficient. So there must be also a massive investment in literacy to allow, especially for women and girls, to be able to use the internet to which they might get access. And then there is the question which is essential. There must be some guardrails to avoid that internet to become the spreader of hate speech, the spreader of harassment. Namely, what we are seeing is special harassment targeting women. I mean, women politicians, women journalists, women in positions of public recognition are now viciously attacked through social media with all kinds of campaigns. So we need a free internet, but we need to have some guardrails and some mechanisms that avoid these forms of vicious behavior not to be possible. It's not easy to find the way, because this could also be a pretext by some to really cut freedom of expression and to manipulate the internet in favor of government action or something of the sort. So it's not easy to find a solution, but I'm entirely in agreement. We need a global free internet. We need literacy for everybody to access. And we need to have some mechanism that creates guardrails that do not put into question freedom of expression, but protect, namely women, from the kind of vicious forms of harassment and bullying that we are now seeing in the internet. Women and girls.
Thank you.
We see lots of people depressed and lots of people anguished because of this.
Thank you, SG. I will take, please, one of, yes, you. And then you, my lady. And there you go. We will have another round. I will, sure. Sorry? Okay, fine.
Thank you very much for opportunity to talk from deepest heart of Ukrainian women. Dear General Secretary, I want to thank you very much for being in Ukraine and support Ukrainian people. Dear sisters, I want to really thank you, each of your family, each of your heart, to support Ukrainian women and children. It's a terrible situation what happened with Ukraine. Sorry, I'm emotional. My mom was born during the Second War outside of Ukraine. My mom passed away during this war outside of Ukraine. 35 million Ukrainian families have terrible story, own story during this year. The line of fighting is equal of line of fighting of the Second War in Ukraine. 250,000 square kilometers we mining territory in Ukraine, and now we will have from 100 years for remining. In October, we sent our independent delegation of Ukrainian women, which are right now here. Please stand up. We sent special statement from our independent delegation to you and ask you immediately change status of United Nations. Let's do it together. We are ready to support, to develop a new mechanism which will protect all countries of the world from aggression, our neighbors, not only Russia. We have problem in all continents in the world. Each nation now is being under this security. Please, let's together with women do it. We know how to do it. We are ready to work with you together. We love you very much. Really love. Thank you.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you. Please identify yourself. Go ahead.
SG. This is... Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was... I'm Miriam Tam. I'm a youth activist, climate, and advocate of my indigenous people of the north of Chad, who are the Ga people. We also live in Libya, Sudan, Niger. I work for the humanitarian organization, Association Les Femmes de la Diaspora Tchadienne, in English, Women of Chadian Diaspora, working in Chad, Niger, Sudan, Libya, and France. The president of the association, Sadia Bakar, here, gave me the opportunity to speak here. I'm the first representative at the United Nations of my indigenous GAR people. I'm here in front of you because I'm one of the privileges one in my region is not fair. The Chadian government is absent at the CSW. The NGO are not the substitution of the obligation of the state. How do you want women's rights advance in the Chad? In Chadian government is not present at the negotiation. Don't forget the minority in decision and young people in your decision, please. As you live in this room, remember that I have just said, and next year we can moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Excellencies and friends in the room this morning, I'm Eleanor Wadinobi. I am the International President of the Medical Women's International Association. Right now, our calendars are defined by the COVID-19 pandemic, pre-COVID, post-COVID. COVID exposed the fragile underbelly of the health systems around the world. We are here today because we are healthy. I am speaking of health not just as the absence of disease, but health in its entirety. Mental health, physical health, digital health. Friends, when we talk about peace, it is because there is absence of violence right from the home. Because I can pick up my phone and know that I'm in a safe space using my phone. Because I can be in this room and know that I'm in a safe space. Secretary General, when you spoke of the fact that there needs to be transformative change, especially for women. Transformative change only happens when there is an enabling environment, when there's the pinnacle of commitment by governments. And therefore, my plea is that in these very hallowed chambers, when nation states speak, we demand of them that they commit to preventing every form of violence against women and girls. And that can only happen through a global treaty. A global treaty to prevent violence against women and girls will ensure that every nation on earth commits. It will ensure that there is accountability. It will ensure that there will be metrics-based monitoring, not subjective monitoring. Lastly, in speaking to my dear friend from Wilf today, Cecilia, she reminded me that time has come for us to stop putting in silos the different issues that affect women and girls, including cyber violence. Once we take the woman and girl as humanity in her entirety, a treaty will deal not just with what we are going through with technology, it will deal with mental health, it will deal with the guns and ammunition, the drones that we have in the air, it's not just about women, peace and security, but how women participate in lashing back at the backlash. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I give back the microphone to you, Secretary General.
Well, first of all, I just came from Kiev this week, 2 days ago, no, 3 days ago. I'm starting not to have a clear idea about my trips, but and I can only express my deep respect for what you represent and for what you have said. I mean, the biggest refugee outflow in history since the Second World War is the refugee outflow from Ukraine, and it's essentially women and children. And so women are indeed suffering in a way that is totally disproportionate in relation to this tragedy. It is clear, the UN Charter is clear. No one can use force or threat the use of force against the territorial integrity of the country. And so obviously the Russian invasion of the Ukraine is a violation of international law, it's a violation of the UN Charter, and it has been very clearly expressed by us. And at the same time, the UN is doing its best in relation to humanitarian action inside Ukraine. And as we speak, we are discussing in Geneva to see if the Black Sea Grain Initiative can be rolled over. So, I mean, we are deeply committed to help as much as we can the Ukrainian people in this very dramatic situation. So thank you very much for your testimony, and you can be absolutely sure of our commitment and of our solidarity with the people suffering in such dramatic circumstances. About Chad, I was with the president of the transition, and one of the things we strongly insisted is to make sure that we have a truly inclusive dialogue about the future of Chad, and that truly inclusive dialogue must naturally take into account all areas of the population, and particularly indigenous groups. By the way, I think the UN has not done enough in relation to the rights of indigenous people. I would recommend for those that are in New York, that are not from New York, that are visiting New York, there is a cultural center called SHED, S-H-E-D, in Hudson Yards, with a fantastic exhibition on one of the peoples of the Amazonia. And one of the things that I visited the exhibition, and one of the things that I was deeply impressed is by the testimony of the leaders of the community that were there, and this is true in Brazil, but it is true in Guyana, it's true in Suriname, it's true in Venezuela. Illegal gold mining using mercury is destroying completely the habitat and is killing people. And I was very happy to see, after the exhibition, that President Lula sent the police and the army to that area to chase the illegal miners and to protect the indigenous population. But as I said, we see the rights of indigenous people being violated dramatically in the world, and I think as UN we have not been doing enough. We have a forum of indigenous people every year during 1 week with people coming from all over the world, but I recognize that this must be stronger in our priorities, and I thank you very much for your testimony. Now, about the treaty. The treaty depends on member states. What we have done was I made an appeal. So we created a group of heads of state and government, champions in relation to against violence against women and girls. And we asked all governments to have a national emergency plan against violence against women and girls. There was a mixed response. Some governments indeed took it seriously. Other governments just paid lip service but didn't do much. And as you said, the violence is not just a question, localized question. It's a broader question, cannot be put into silos. But a treaty is something we cannot, as Secretariat, create. It needs to come from member states coming together. And so civil society needs to put pressure on governments to make sure that governments come together on this objective. But as you said, this is today a central question. It's not only in conflict situations, it's everywhere. Violence against women and girls, and cyber violence now in particular. And what we are seeing in the digital space is unfortunately not decreasing, but increasing. And this must be a priority for all of us.
Thank you, SG. I believe we have time for one more last round of questions. And let us do another 3. Okay. Okay, there is a lady in the red in the back there.
Yes, thank you.
And okay. Yes.
Yes, I'm ready for now.
I am. I am looking at all the room, and I am sorry that we only have until 11:15. But if you have any thoughts or any more remarks, we will be happy to receive them at UN Women and pass them on to the Secretary General event as we go through. And also you have the chance to, yes, for written answers back from the Secretary General. So I will share with you the email where to send, but let us first finish with this last round and then we will move forward. Thank you. I really appreciate your patience and also your passion and your engagement with the Secretary General. Thank you. So we start.
That lady was already speaking. And,
okay, we will take 4 then. We will take 4 last ones. Okay, go ahead.
When I speak.
Thank you so much, SG, for that kind gesture. Thank you so much. I'm Ogechi Aduko. I'm from Nigeria. This is a bit of a deja vu for me because in 2018, in this same place, I appealed to the SG concerning the women of my country, the women and girls. The slogan or the phrase has been, leave no woman behind. And I told the SG that the women and girls of my country were not just being left behind, they were being left dead. We had cases of Boko Haram, girls being kidnapped, killed, raped. 5 years on, I thought I would come here with maybe a different story or cherry news, but it is worse. It has doubled. In fact, it has tripled. Recently, we had an election where women were being harassed and told that if they didn't vote for a particular candidate, they would be raped. In fact, a woman was stabbed in the face. Kudos to her. She came back, she went to the hospital, got her face fixed, all bloody and everything, and went back and voted. Nobody was going to take her voice or her vote. So what I want to appeal to the SG for, I mean, as I said, I came here, it's deja vu for me. I'm wondering, would my voice mean anything? Would anything matter? Would there be a difference? Because yes, in the digital world, in whatever world, safety, but the safety has to start from everything. You know, it will affect the digital world, it will affect the marketplace, it will affect the homes if it starts from, you know, ground zero, so to speak. There's impunity. I use my country as an example. There's impunity in my country. You know, policies are not, you know, favorable to the women, and when it is not even implemented properly. So please, SG, I appeal again. I need you to come to the aid of the women and girls of Nigeria. They're being left dead. The government does not care. There's impunity. They're being, you know, raped every which way. Their finances, you know, are being stolen. misappropriation by the government. Thank you, SG.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Sara. I'm a 16-year-old student from Mexico. I'm part of an NGO called Red Mujeres and the Anahuac Institute. Thank you very much for being here, listening and acknowledging us. And now I would like to ask, after giving access to the internet for everyone, what comes next? Yes, it is essential to have the internet as a human right, but also to include it from a gender perspective. What will be done to break the digital gap or fighting the digital violence against women? What will be the mechanism to have a global and safe connection? Likewise, in Mexico, the number of contingents of disappeared women is constantly growing. We march so women stop disappearing, so the suffering stops, so we can walk safely in the streets and navigate safely through the media, so we can be free and without fear. And yet, feminicides only grow. At least in Mexico, 12 women and girls die every day. The displacement of women from their native homes has grown in large amounts because they feel unsafe being out there by themselves. I have the privilege of being here speaking in front of all of you because I am part of the tremendously small percentage of girls in Mexico that, thanks God, still can say that they haven't suffered from any of these threats. But how long will this so-called privilege last? What will the UN do to implement security both online and offline in the feminist perspective so girls like me do not need to grow the fear? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, madam.
I am Linda Wilson, a delegate of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, and I'm here today representing the voices of over 10 million girls in about 152 countries across the globe. I would like to address Stop the Violence, which is a global flagship campaign of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts to stop the violence against women and girls. The prevalence of online violence against women is rising. Regrettably, it often leads to victims' lives being ruined because of the offline damages they typically cause. In an effort to better understand what it's like to be a young woman online and what needs to be done to ensure freedom and equality, our She Serves Freedom survey, which was introduced during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, has gathered more than 1,000 voices and experiences from young women from around the world. Girls from more than 70 different nations shared their voices with the world. We discovered that 41% of girls and young women responded that they have received unwanted and unwelcome messages of sexual content. 100% of respondents believe that this behavior, action, and violation towards them was because they were girls and women. 42% of girls who have felt harm online have now changed their behaviors as a consequence. Changing behavior, imposing restrictions on how they engage online, and self-censoring. These results are alarming, and we call for immediate actions to be put in place. Urge governments to take into consideration the serious harms of online violence and its effects, as well as the need for clear laws and legal protection in this area. This can be achieved by adopting a comprehensive definition of technology-facilitated violence against women and girls, and including the participation of survivors and women's organizations, with special emphasis on closing legal loopholes. Also, take action against misogynistic hate speech and power that social media is giving in spreading misinformation, and the increasing incel culture by strengthening the legal frameworks and ensuring non-formal education, addressing gender stereotypes, and consent is mainstreamed. Provide legislative direction to criminal justice bodies through adoption, strengthening and enforcing laws against online violence against women and girls. In summary, I would like to ask your advice on how we can make governments more accountable towards their legal commitments and to ensure they involve the voices of more women and girls in their delegates and policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have one last speaker on this end, please. Go ahead.
Hello. Maura Cunningham from Ireland. My question, Secretary General, is what can and will the UN do for the women and girls of Afghanistan? Thank you.
Back to you, SG. Thank you.
First of all, to the distinguished representative from Nigeria. Well, your voice was heard. In one of the last Ramadans, I made a visit of solidarity of Ramadan, as I usually do, and I decided to choose Borno State for that. Borno State is the state in which Boko Haram has been traditionally stronger, and I decided to go to Borno State exactly to show my strong commitment against terrorism, violence against women, and my solidarity with the victims. What I discovered was that the situation in Borno State has improved, but at the same time, things are getting worse in other parts of Nigeria. I recognize that many of the problems that you mentioned are indeed dramatic ones. But I did not forget your intervention, and as I said, I went to Borno State myself, knowing that Borno State was the epicenter of the most tragic incidents that have happened in the last few years in relation to women being killed, to girls being abducted, the school dramatic attacks. And so I took very seriously your comments, and we take very seriously the protection of women in Nigeria, and we had very frank and, I would say, constructive discussions with the President and with the government and with the Governor of Borno State. But of course, this is a very dramatic situation that is going on. But your words were not forgotten. Now, the two next questions are linked to the same question, which is, we see violence against women increasing, women and girls, increasing physically. Femicide was mentioned. Femicide is growing in different parts of the world. And we see it happening directly through harassment and bullying in the internet, but also we see the internet as an instrument of groups that propagate violence against women. So it's a double-edged sword. Internet is used directly to bully and to harass and to persecute women, but at the same time, internet is a rallying organization for the groups that perpetrate violence against women. And now, what are we going to do on that? One of the objectives of the so-called Our Common Agenda is to bring together governments, platforms, scientists, and the civil society to try to approve next year a global digital compact. And one of the objectives of the Global Digital Compact, and this is also related to the colleague that spoke after, one of the objectives of the Global Digital Compact is exactly to establish some global understanding of what needs to be done through legislation, and what needs to be done through codes of conduct of platforms, what needs to be done through different other mechanisms, but we need to have institutional mechanisms that allow for the digital space to be protected, to be addressed in order to make sure that there is effective protection against women and girls. And the civil society will be part of the work to prepare this Global Digital Compact. I'll be presenting in 2 or 3 months, I think in 2 months, a first policy brief on how we see the Global Digital Compact. We are starting discussions with member states, and we hope to be able to gather a global consensus on these. But obviously, each country, each government has a special responsibility on fighting violence against women. That is why we asked every country to have, online and offline, an emergency plan in this regard. Afghanistan, it's a dramatic situation. I've sent there our Deputy Secretary General. It's a battle in many fronts. First front, girls need to be in school. We had at a certain moment some hope that it would be acceptable the presence of girls in secondary and in university school, but this now has backtracked. Now, we are working in several provinces where it was possible to turn around these things. So in several provinces, we have schools working with girls. But it is not a government policy. It's something, I mean, the country is huge. There are several ethnic groups. There is not full control by the Taliban of the situation. So we have been supporting schools wherever it is possible, schools with girls wherever it is possible in the secondary level. The university, we had now a terrible setback. Second battle is for women to be allowed to work normally. And we are in the present moment in a big struggle to allow for humanitarian aid to be, for all humanitarian agencies and the NGOs to have women working. This was not allowed. Our pressure, and the Deputy Secretary General was very committed to that, we got a number of meaningful exceptions. On the other hand, the donor community has said there will only be aid where women are involved. Where women are not involved, the aid will not be present. And so the pressure goes on in order to guarantee that we have women working in the humanitarian sector. In the public services, only very few have women working, and we are fighting hard to increase it. In general, the situation of women is very dramatic. Now, part of this is in relation to the Taliban themselves, and obviously the Taliban have adopted norms and legislation that are totally unacceptable from the point of view of rights of women, practically creating what I called here an apartheid against women. But part of it is also rooted in the old traditions of the Afghan society. And I can tell you a story I lived myself. This was a few years ago when I was High Commissioner for Refugees. We had an office in Kandahar, and during the night the office was attacked, we believe by the Taliban. The UN staff was not there, but the 3 guards that were contracted by us were there, and they were killed. I went there 2 days afterwards, and one of the things we decided was to give to the wives of the contractors the same rights that they would have if they were UN staff. And I asked to see one of the wives. And so she came with a burqa, you know, that thing that completely covers, and 4 men. She was not able to talk to me, and also, I mean, it was a kind of it was unclear whether she was not willing or whether she was not allowed. I mean, it's this very complicated situation. And the men were dealing with the issue, and I was thinking, well, we are going to give her a lot of money, and probably they are going to rob her. I mean, and I could see how deeply rooted in the Afghan society, especially in the rural areas, is the total, I mean, as if women were just property of men. I mean, So this is one of the biggest battles we have, is Afghanistan. Probably the worst today in the world, where we see that the patriarchy coming to the most abject level. And we'll go on fighting. But I have to say, it's not an easy fight. Because not only we have the Taliban, and especially the Taliban are a bit divided on this, but the core that is in Kandahar, the Amir, or the leadership, the religious leadership, is, and again, it's not Islam. It is a completely perverted interpretation of Islam. We just had the Organization of Islamic. We are working more and more with Muslim countries to tell them not to do it. Because, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has issued a statement saying that what they are doing is against the Quran. It's not Islam, it's against the Quran. So we are really mobilizing not only the Western countries, because they will say, okay, it's Western countries. No, mobilizing the Muslim world. Amina went through a number of Muslim countries before going to Afghanistan to put pressure on them to say this has nothing to do with the true face of Islam. This is an absolutely unacceptable form of behavior. Unfortunately, we are seeing an enormous resistance. And as I said, part of this resistance is the Taliban themselves. Part of it is the deeply rooted situation, especially outside the cities. I mean, we had for a certain time, especially in the cities, not normal, but a much better situation for women and girls. With the Taliban, this was reversed, and we went back to what the situation was traditionally in the rural areas of Afghanistan. So it's an horrible situation. It's a shame for humanity to have this kind of thing happening.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Time has run out. But as I said earlier, please, I invite you all to send any questions you might have, or any intervention you might want, or any remark you might to get to the attention of the Secretary General. Send it, please, to csw@unwomen.org. I repeat, csw@unwomen.org. And the subject line, please write question to SG. And the Secretary General will answer all your questions also by email. Thank you again, all of you. And I must say to our Feminist-in-Chief, thank you so much, Secretary General, for your vision, for your leadership, for your time. And over to you for some concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. And I think we have a common task. We have seen for centuries women's rights progressively moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, in the last 3 or 4 years, we are seeing things getting again in the wrong direction. So we must be united in pushing back against this pushback. And then what was discussed in the CSW is extremely important. We are seeing artificial intelligence and other forms of research and use of technology in a way that is totally biased against women. And there is a risk that this will revert, not only for a short period, but this will revert a centuries trend of improvement of women's rights. And I'll give you an example. This is a true story. A couple in the US went to the bank to open a bank account and ask for 2 credit cards. The couple went. The couple was a couple, but they had separated property. And the bank account was given, and the woman was more wealthy than the man. But when the credit cards came, the ceiling of the credit card of the woman was lower than the ceiling of the credit card of the man. And they went to the bank to say, but I mean, this doesn't make sense because, I mean, and the man was saying, my wife is even wealthier than me. And the answer of the bank was, well, it's the algorithm. So the algorithms that are being developed by artificial intelligence, 40% of them, according to a statistic, that are gender biased, which means that automatically the rights of women are putting into question. It's not a decision of someone against women, it is the automatic result of how the softwares are designed that discriminate against women. And so this is a fundamental battle in the months and years to come, and we count a lot on your very strong voice to allow us to fight this battle and hopefully to win it. Thank you very much to all of you.